Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 219 and we have a good one for you today. Today's fish is one of the more popular eating fish from the ocean world and is actually quite beautiful and very interesting fish. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is the blubberlip snapper. Now, the blubberlip snapper, or scientific name Letjanus rivulatus, again that's Letjanus rivulatus, is part of the family Letjanidae, which is the family of snappers. Now, the blubberlip snapper is found in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, all along the eastern African coast, all along the Indian coast, all the way up to Japan, and then it can be found as far south as Western and Northern Australia. So a very, very large range. So this is definitely one of those fish that we are not creating a video on because it's very rare. We're concerned about it. This fish is very stable. It is in no danger of going extinct, but is still a rather important fish. And I felt that it was time to do another snapper because it had been a while since we'd done a snapper. Now, in terms of where you're going to find this fish is associated with reefs, as many snappers are. And the adults are found on the deep coastal slopes, so in the deeper waters along the sloping areas of coastal reefs, whereas juveniles are going to be found more on the flats associated with algal growths. So basically, this fish can be found anywhere between 1.5 and 100 meters in depth, which is essentially anywhere to from 5 to 330 feet. So it does have a wide range. It's not a very specific fish. Many snappers are not and can be found at all those depths. Now, this is not a deep water fish. You're not going to find this 2,000 feet down or anything like that. It's really more of a shallower fish. And in the ocean world, 300 feet down is still pretty shallow. Now, in terms of size, this is actually a decently large snapper. They can get up to about 80 centimeters, which is around 31 inches in length. But they usually average around 60 centimeters, which is around 34 inches. In terms of weight, the maximum published weight is around 11 kilograms, which is 24 pounds. Considering that was a maximum published weight, more than likely, since the average is a little bit less, about 3/4, you can probably say that this fish probably averages around 15 to 18 pounds, which is still a phenomenal size fish. And you can see why a fish of this size could be rather important for eating, especially as plentiful as this fish is. Now, this fish is very deep bodied, as you can tell from this picture. Usually it's about, I believe it's just a little over half as deep as it is long. So if you take its entire length and divide it by half, that's going to be about the depth you're going to get. Very, very deep bodied fish. Still laterally compressed, as many deep bodied fish are. So it's kind of squat from the side, but not something like a panfish that is very thin like a pancake. This fish still has some meat to it, obviously, considering it's still around 15 pounds. It has this very steeply sloped forehead. It's a little more obvious in this picture. Very steep sloped forehead, with a spiny dorsal and anal fin. Now, remember, usually this is actually considered 2 dorsal fins. I'm not sure if this is specifically 2 dorsal fins, but they are connected, so they look like the same dorsal fin, but I don't know if these are technically if this is technically 1 dorsal fin or 2 dorsal fins. I do believe it is actually 1 dorsal fin, which that goes into some biological characteristics that we don't necessarily get into, but it does have plenty of spines on the dorsal fin, and it actually has a few spines in its anal fin. Now, as you can see, it also has these very bright yellow fins, even on this, which is a little more lackluster in color, it still has these very striking yellow fins, which kind of adds to the beauty of this fish, in my opinion. Something interesting to note that you can tell, the dorsal fin has this very rounded edge, whereas the anal fin is actually a relatively sharp point. This one not so much, but this one you can see. And that's kind of interesting, considering that more often than not, I kind of feel that the dorsal and the anal fins kind of mirror each other, or it's the exact opposite. If you have a rounded dorsal, you usually have a rounded anal fin, or the opposite of this, like I said, of maybe a sharp pointed dorsal fin, but still a rounded anal fin. So that was kind of a neat little characteristic. By the way, I could be completely wrong on that generalized assumption, but I do feel when I'm running through the fish in my head that this is kind of the opposite of what I usually expect. Now it does have this very flat caudal fin, pretty wide. It is slightly emarginated, very, very slightly, but I would almost consider this truncated, which is basically broom shaped, very flat. This one does, I believe it would be considered more in breeding colors, but it has that kind of overall brown reddish color, dark olive color with many blue flecks, we could say, because you can see they're not, like, you might call these spots, but there's enough like little I don't really want to call them dashes, but maybe dashes is the best way. These kind of like bluer dashes and spots along the body, just kind of blotches. There you go. What's that test? The blotter, the psychologist, the Rorschach test. Kind of that sort of style. There's not just like true spot. It's kind of like blot. And you can also see right here, it does have these worm tracks on the head, which are called vermiculations. And in fact, that's how it's got its name, rivulatus. They were named for the rivulets along the side of the head, which is this vermiculation pattern of the stripes along the front of the head. And you can see here, even though this fish is paler, you can still tell that it's got these vermiculations on the side. Now, very obviously, it kind of has this very thick bluer lips, which, as you can imagine, is probably where it got its common name from, the blubberlip snapper. And it is a very noticeably kind of thick and wider lip structure, which, you know, is always kind of neat when it's easy to say it. Younger fish will have this dark bar over the pectoral fin, and they'll also have a white spot on the flanks. And we have an actual picture here, so you can see this very dark band right here. And juveniles will actually have 3 to 8 vertical bars down the side, which do fade as they get older. So you can see here, you can kind of see the barring here, but it's essentially disappeared. You really can't see it here. This one does look like it's old enough. I do not see a yellow spot, obviously. Maybe it was here. I could not really find a good picture of a juvenile, and I'm not 1000% sure exactly where that spot would be associated with. But this coloration right here kind of makes me think the spot might have been on the lower side, right about here. But even in its young stage, you can tell that this is an absolutely beautiful fish. This person caught it while fishing. It is very popular as a fishing fish, and I mean, how could you not? Pulling this out of the ocean, it's got to be amazing to see this coloration. Beautiful, and still kind of eaten size. You can tell this is still like probably 6 to 8 inches long, which if you're fishing solo and you're on a stranded island, probably still going to provide a decent enough meal for you. And speaking of meals, this fish is actually considered an excellent fish for eating, and it's even grown via aquaculture in Southeastern Asia, which is pretty neat. to have, aquaculture. Now, I have discussed my opinions on aquaculture in Asia, but it is still a successful there. But for speaking of excellent fish for eating, it has been linked to ciguatera poisoning. And that's actually kind of the interesting fact we're going to end the video on. And it's not necessarily about the fish, it's more about ciguatera poisoning. This is a poisoning that a lot of people hear about all the time. And it is the most common type of food poisoning related to fish. And ciguatera is a food poisoning caused by ciguatoxins. And these fish get them via biomagnification. And it's important to note there are really 3 instances of where fish and other animals get toxins in their muscle tissue when you eat them, where humans can get them. There's bioaccumulation, bioconcentration, and then biomagnification. And biomagnification is the one that you really have to be the most concerned about. And so this is kind of the interesting fact, is also a little teaching moment. What is biomagnification? And biomagnification is really more prevalent in highly predatory fish, which this fish is one. It eats a ton of cephalopods. It will eat other fish. Essentially, it just kind of eats whatever it can. And what happens is ciguatoxins originate from a very specific algae, I believe. So single-celled organisms, an algae. And they have a very minute trace of toxins in their bloodstream, in their cells. And what happens is the next trophic level will eat that algae. Well, the ciguatoxins cannot be essentially processed by the body, by digestive processes. So the animal sort of uptakes the toxins into their body. And those toxins don't get excreted via normal methods. And so all the toxins that get eaten will sort of accumulate. Well, algae gets eaten by plankton or shrimp or things like that. So the shrimp eat a lot of algae, meaning they get all of the algae's toxins. Even though a single algae doesn't have many toxins, the shrimp does, and it uptakes all that toxin and it retains it. It stays in the body. And then smaller fish, or octopus or something, eats that shrimp, and it uptakes all the toxins from every shrimp it eats, and it keeps all those toxins. And then the higher level fish eats the medium level fish, and it is getting all the toxins from that fish. So it's important to note that in trophic levels, I'm sure if you go into school, you remember the trophic pyramid, whereas your base, you had your producers, herbivores, predators, or primary predators, or I think it's like algae producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, something like that. So kind of think of it as a pyramid. So one algae doesn't have a lot of toxins, but the shrimp have to eat so much of that algae to stay alive that it gets more concentrated, and it's all in those shrimp. Well, then the next step up is a littler fish that's eating all those shrimp, and every shrimp it's picking up gets those toxins. So you can think of it this way. If every algae cell has one ciguatoxin in it, we'll just say one to make it simple. The shrimp has to eat 10 to survive. So it gathers 10 ciguatoxins. So 10 ciguatoxins per shrimp. Well, then the little fish has to eat 10 shrimp to survive. This is obviously a gross oversimplification. But so the little fish has to eat 10 shrimp to stay alive, meaning it ate 10 shrimp with 10 ciguatoxins each. So it got 100 ciguatoxins. Well, then you have the larger fish that eats the smaller fish. So it eats 10 smaller fish, which each have 100 ciguatoxins, meaning they now have 1,000 ciguatoxins in their body. And then you go to a slightly larger fish, each one having 1,000. Well, now you have 10,000. So you can see how this bioaccumulation really ramps up the higher level you get. And that is why it's important when you're eating fish to be careful, not only where is it coming from, but also be aware that the higher in a trophic level of a fish you're eating, the more likely it is to have situations like that. That, you know, it's one of the reasons why they say don't eat mercury, or why salmon can give you mercury poison, is because there's such a high trophic level that they're eating and getting all the mercury of not only what they ate, but all the things that the things they ate, and what they ate, and what, I mean, you can see how it can kind of snowball out of control, especially in an outside situation. Now, this isn't intended to scare anyone. It is literally just sort of an information on what biomagnification is, and to be aware of what it is and how these toxins come up, and why it can literally just be one fish that can get you, why you can eat one fish, be perfectly fine, and one fish and not be, essentially get ciguatera poisoning, which again is a food poisoning. It happens a lot, but you know, go see a doctor, and basically the doctor will help you fight the symptoms and you can get through it. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the link down below. It is by no means expected, but very much appreciated regardless. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. And peace.